Is this here a unique proposition on the market? This is the Peugeot 3008, and you can now get an all-wheel drive version for the electric version, which is the most powerful yet. And at the same time, you can get this one here with a very large battery at relatively short length, plus as a petrol hybrid, as a plug-in hybrid or full electric versions. And we will also compare the 5008, the one with the longer wheelbase and up to 7 seats for you. And we're going to talk about it here with Thomas Nautical in 4K, full screen, full length. Let's go. This here, the 3008 in Obsession Blue. Yeah, pretty cool Thomas blue color for sure. GT trim, highest trim level, which is also very popular among the customers. Then you get the Matrix LED lamps as standard. Also pretty cool here, these Peugeot lion claws that go down here, which are also then the turning indicators or hazard lights when you activate them. Dot style grille, so very modern styling. And the funny thing about this vehicle here, it's only the compact segment, 4.54 meters or 179 inches. Yet at the same time, for the electric versions, they offer a 97 kilowatt-hour battery. And that is really a unique offering. Hardly anyone offers this battery size and this range in this very rather comparable short segment. The battery that is with this vehicle here, however, 73 kilowatt hours. 20-inch wheels you see here, these are directly with this top version indeed, and triggers my OCD because this asymmetric wheel design is hardly ever that they both stand in the same direction, and yeah, it really triggers me. Your as well. That's interesting here, the GT trim also with high gloss black around the wheel arches. And the thing is that this all-wheel drive version, which is new, has an acceleration figure of 6 seconds, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. However, that one only in combination with the smaller battery, 73 kilowatt hours, because they said if they will do the combination of all-wheel drive plus then the big battery, it would go too high in the prices. And let's directly talk about that because of that reason. So it starts at 40,000 euros with the petrol, somewhat, MHEV hybrid engine. And then it goes like 50,000 for the EV version. And if you go for the big battery, more 60, or the all-wheel drive trim high spec, you can get it to over 60,000 euros. So like 40 to 60 something thousand euros is the spend for this whole vehicle. And if you go for the 5008, the long wheelbase version, so to speak, then you add some 3,000 euros each. At the rear, a very distinctive design indeed, like integrated wing. Beautiful signature for the tail lamps, and there also this 3-dot design when you hit the turning indicators. Pretty cool actually. And under the hood here for the EV version, no frunk sadly. If you're more interested, for example, in the entry level petrol engine, we also have a review of that. You can watch that one later. And as I said, also plug-in hybrid available, interesting. We also have a separate data comment, and also in the video description there's like a data section where you can read all the horsepower and acceleration figures of all the different engine concepts. And usually it is a front-wheel driven vehicle. So if there's an all-wheel drive version like here, this one now, there's a front motor is also the stronger one, and then you get an additional rear motor. And charging 11 or 22 kilowatt AC and 160 kilowatt DC. So the charging then 10 to 80% state of charge is more than 30 minutes each. And now our comparing look at the 5008, which is pretty much similar in the front, but then significantly longer here at 4.79 meters or 189 inches, means 25 centimeters or 10 inches longer overall. And the wheelbase here is the main part of it, is 16 centimeters or 6 inches longer in the wheelbase, to also house 7 seats on the interior. Soon going to compare that for you in the interior part. You have one visual difference, of course, besides that it's longer. Here this is a more pronounced part in the silver contrast there, at the last pillar. And the rear is also a little bit different. Here more upright, a little bit less coupe-ish to give you more space on the inside. And I said up to 7 seats. At the moment they're always in, but I heard some rumors that there will be a 5-seater version also of the 5008 very soon if you just want the larger trunk. And have you noticed something in the image? I'm waiting for the comment. Yes, that's right. Look at the wheels. Yes, in this situation they are both in the same direction, almost as we would have made that like manually. It's of course pure coincidence, just that in this coincidence, it's absolutely correct. And now when you look at it, that's fine, right? But otherwise, big OCD trigger. Behind me, by the way, the very famous Black Forest in Germany. And door closing sounds is okay, I would say. Yeah, not great, but also not bad at all. And this is here the key fob, the standard PSA known key fob. Inside of the doors, top part is soft touch here, then a nice fabric insert and beautiful integration of ambient lighting. Look at that. And it also continues here at the inside right there behind the screen. And actually this flying screen will be pretty special. Soon more to that. The rest of the inside of the doors here, it's soft for your elbow, but here it should be a little bit thicker, I would say, than the classic window controls. However, it's not logical to me that they are falling down. They should be more upright, but this is like the design. Things are always extraordinary here with this vehicle. Oh, and we have felt covering at the inside of the doors. Nice to see that. And also a large entry sill badge, why not? And this very extraordinary steering wheel. And of course, one of the highlights are these sport seats here with microfiber in the GT trim with the comfort pack. This vehicle here, full spec in the front, dual insulation, is not the thickest windows, but we have the dual insulation here, the dual lamination, so that's good. Rear windows, standard. Welcome to this cockpit with a very expressive design here, beautiful fabric use here, then ambient light integration, you can pick different colors, soft touch dashboard, a flying screen here, either 2x10 inch or then this 21 inch in the higher trims that goes all the way through with instruments and infotainment. User interface has some pros and cons, let's take it that way. Then seats, either Allure or base GT would be the fabric on the inside. An option with the comfort pack, you can get the microfiber here, and then also the passenger seat is equal to the driver's seat. If you go with the base trim, the passenger seat will be less comfortable than the driver's seat. You have to look into your market specifications. For example, with the German markets and probably with other markets, is the way is that only if you got the comfort pack in the GT trim, then this seat is equal to this seat. It's very important if you drive with a passenger quite often. So good to know that. Also soft here for your elbow with the fabric on the center side. It's a split armrest, some space underneath. You can store a lot of stuff there. Cup holders are 2-dot style adaptive. Then you have this another flying element here with some hotkeys there. Not the most useful ones though, I can say. Inductive charging pad is not ventilated though. Then you have this very interesting cubby hole. Look at that. So this opens to the side to charging possibilities here. No covering on the inside here, however. So this is more or less basic. But interesting is that this, I mean, it doesn't make too much sense, honestly, but what is interesting is that even if you put a coin here and you think that gets lost here on that side, it does not actually, because it's built in a way that here even the coin comes up again. So yeah, it's good that it has this feature, but the question is, why is it built in this place in the first place, you know? Then here the glove box is also dampened, and look at that, how it's integrated with this curved design here. So this car does not want to be, you know, easy basically. It wants to be something unique, extraordinary. Also here, for example, with the switch gear like this here. Yeah, ordinary or out of the ordinary then. This is where this taking you in indeed. Just here, the columns, they are pretty much standard, and this gaming style steering wheel, flat bottom, but it does create a lot of fun while driving. That's actually true. And here headroom to the side where there's no roof, 189, 6'2", still enough headroom left, that's no problem. Soon I'll also open this top panoramic roof, then let's do it right now. So there we go, so you can still really open it, that's good. Leave some fresh air in, there we go. And then you can also apply the shade when it's getting too sunny, when it's getting too hot. So this is also possible. And the driver POV here with the buttons at the steering wheel. And I mean, they at least give you some feedback as well as for the cruise control, for example. And then here, when you look over, for me, it doesn't block much. I think it's fine also to watch the speed and so on. Main infotainment here, for example, I show you the rear view camera, which is yeah, could be better from the quality, but I think it's somewhat okay. And then you have the split here that you can set your individual hotkeys in the lower part. But when you want to access some stuff, it also takes a while, you know, so that you go to these different menus because they always have this animation, and to me this is in a way taking too long, you know what I mean? And some things to activate are just too complicated, and yeah, by time you maybe learn more about this vehicle, but then you think, why does it do it, you know? And then you have to go back to some other modes again, that something is working, you know? So yeah, but then you start searching like how yeah, you see, I'm kind of getting confused myself here. We'll be back with the climate unit, and then you ask yourself like, yeah, okay, but what about the vent strings? Ah, there we are. Then it comes to life again. And then here in the main home menu, see it. Now it finally hops back. Huh? Why did it do this? So you see, it's constantly doing things that you don't want, actually. And this is now the integration, but then it's not always there, and sometimes it disappears again. So I'm not sure if that's ideal. What is cool, new feature here, when you press and hold this one here for 2 seconds, then you can see it in the top left, the lane keeping assist, the speed alert, beep 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 alert, and also the driver fatigue alert are all deactivated at once. And the Apple CarPlay or Android Auto integration looks like this. And here also, once again, look at that. Here the climate unit is gone then. You know, only when you go back to the home menu and have the car internal GPS, then you see your climate unit again. And recuperation here with the shifting pedals, stronger or less strong here in 3 levels. And it's saved with last mode when you restart the vehicle. And we have discovered a very interesting feature for you here. When it's a little bit dark, you can see there's even ambient lighting at the inside of the panoramic roof. And even if you apply this shade, it's actually underneath the shade there. That's so then cool. When the shade closes, the ambient lighting there still stays. So yeah, my hair is almost getting squished there. So that's a pretty cool feature. You can even see it from a distance. And here, of course, when it's darker, then more of this ambient lighting here is also visible. So this is a thing, yeah, they really want to catch up to Mercedes there, obviously. Rear seats here in the back doors, top part, all hard plastic, then nice fabric insert. This really strange ergonomic design that it folds down. Here again hard. Then Isofix at the outside each. GT also comes here with a nice microfiber. Then folding this here down, adaptive cup holders, tablet holder, but this is, let's say, average build quality. We also can get a seat heating for the rear passengers, so that is also possible. And then as for the space we have, since the 3008 is the short wheelbase version, here with this recess, it directly fits when I'm also driving as a tall adult, but nothing more. And the same, okay, Leah laughs about the seat position. Oh, €2 fell out. Yeah, that was the €2 sample thing for the front cubby hole there. It was interesting. Hey, you want €2, man? And then here is some headroom left here with 189, 6'2". Not too much space, but it's also not a long vehicle. Actually, that's the thing. The 5008 then would have the longer wheelbase for more space in the second row and also the third row. The trunk, which is usually at 520 liters, is here only 470 liters. You lose something because of the rear additional motor, but only underneath here. In that respect, it's basically the same. 1.40 meters in width. Cabin trolley fits in vertically, no problem. And the standard length, not to forget that here is about 90 centimeters or 35 inches. Cool thing here is that you can either lift it up. There's a charging cable underneath. And then here, this area would be even deeper in the non-overdrive version. Here, these sides things are actually pretty cool. You can hold this one open by that. It's a very interesting idea. And you can also lower this one here to a lower stage to gain a little bit more height. Then let's remove this one here. It's also easily done. There we go. And then we have the total height here, maximum with a lower position of 31 inches or a little, yeah, it's like 78 centimeters. Gotta say though, here on top, this here is extremely prone to scratches. So this is a very bad build quality from the inside here, from this material. Yeah, sad to see that at this stage, because this is also an area where it can get some easy scratches. Then here, seats, I can grab over. I can also just here open this strap. You can also just put the ski hatch or then the 1/3, 2/3 split. There we go. And here we are. And then the total length is here about 65 inches or 1 meter 65. Now we take a look at the trunk of the 5008, which is a little bit more than 200 liters more overall. 220 or 230 depending on the version, all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. And here it's also 1 meter or 40 inches in width. Difference is here that in the height, so here we are at 70 centimeters or 28 inches. It's not that much because there's no lower position here for this one. You can put this one up here like this. Of course, there would be more height from here, but that doesn't bring any use for the dog box or something like that for you. That's why I took this height here now. And then at the moment, this is the 5-seater setup. And as I said, I'm expecting a full 5-seater soon, that you then have like this flexibility of the 3008 with the lower setting here and don't have the seats stored here. So yeah, let's see about that. Main interesting thing is here the normal length to the 3rd seating row, which is here at 1 meters and 5 or 41 inches, where it would be ending here in the 3008. So you have this more in trunk length, and you can see you can also use that here with sliding this bench forward. This would also be possible. So that's another thing. And then you can also fold up these seats here like this. They would still have like some like 16 inches or 40 centimeters of trunk also works. And then you can pull these straps here again to fold these seats down. It's just here when you look at the total length, which is then here at 1 meters 90 or 75 inches, this is exactly the difference of 25 centimeters or 10 inches in length, because this is where the total length of the 3008 would end, and this is where this would end. So this is exactly mirroring how this vehicle is longer. And now the 5008 in the rear front cockpit is the same, but here slide this forward or backward, and then here 2/3, 1/3, and individually I can put these here down, for example, just the seat here, and you sit relatively high, gotta say that. That's why also actually less headroom in the rear. That's very interesting. At least then here the combination with the panoramic roof. Legroom, yeah, there is more legroom due to the longer wheelbase, but remember the wheelbase is 16 centimeters or 6 inches longer, and that's not all of that here. So you see that the main focus was to ensure that there is also a potential 3rd row and that also the trunk is longer. So depending on the vehicle, when they make the longer versions, sometimes the emphasis is on, okay, let's make the trunk longer, let's enable a 3rd seating row, or let's put most of that extra legroom in the 2nd seating row, which often happens with like the Chinese versions of an Audi A4, A4L. Then the extra wheelbase is just for the 2nd seating row. Here, not mainly, a little bit. Yes, I have more legroom, but not all of the extra length. You know what I mean? Yeah, but then of course you can vary it if you want more trunk length or not, and so on. And I already put the 3rd seating row up, and there is this somewhat easy access. You can pull here on top of the seat, and it goes forward like this and also up. So this ensures actually a quite good entry. But the question is, how much space do we have there? And for that we do the following test. So first of all, I check it now from the from the length here. Let's move this one forward, that I could still sit behind here like this. This would be possible. And then we can check out how it looks like there. Maybe we can make this a little bit more straight like this. And then I enter on the other side. Then you can check it out in a better way. So, there we go. And now we've jumped the axle, the famous Achssprung, as we would say in German. When I started my television career, actually, this was something that was totally forbidden, that you just like jump, you know, to the other side. But actually, the viewer never cared about that, but there was some theoretical thing. I jump the axle whenever it makes sense, and no one actually cares, because here you can better see, you know, what's happening. So this is the 3rd seating row, and yeah, just even if this one's a little bit more forward, you see I cannot fit here in with my legs, so it's something more for like this soccer thing maybe, that the kids are in the rear. However, no ISOFIX at the 3rd seating row. So it's really in this area, the kids are big enough that they don't need a child seat, but they can't be too big, so they still need to fit in here. Headroom is quite okay, I would say, but limited use, and that's why I'm even more looking forward to that version that just has the longer or more extensive trunk that you can only pick the 5 seats, which is probably then coming up soon. Acceleration. Oh, that was 60 to 130 kilometers an hour with the Peugeot E3008 all-wheel drive. Yeah, now the naming gets a little bit complicated. You also heard our luggage flying back to the trunk there, because it still has a nice punch. You cannot compare it with much stronger electric performance models, because this 0 to 100 figure is 6 seconds here with 3008, but you see here on the motorway it's still reasonably quick, but there are more performant EV SUVs and stuff like that, but of course it will be sufficient for all the use case. Here in the sport mode we have the maximum horsepower available, 325 horsepower, and we also have a distribution which is 60% front, 40% in the rear, because the front electric motor is still stronger. Of course in the rear you somewhat get more traction on the ground, that's why the difference is not stronger, so to speak. And then there would also be the four-wheel drive mode, and I can also go into in the four-wheel drive mode, then does a 50-50 split between front and rear axle, and always engages the all-wheel drive in the same way like the sport mode always engages the all-wheel drive. I'm soon also going to talk about the other normal driving modes. Sport. Whew. So that was then 20 to 120 kilometers an hour. I mean, Leah is used to other stuff meanwhile, so that doesn't even get the Leah screaming meter going. But still, it's a nice acceleration and the strongest so far for this very vehicle. It won't be the super sports vehicle like this, but it's good for the motorway, has some nice features. Also some shortcomings, maybe as for ergonomics of controls or stuff in the screen. But still pretty unique for the shortness of the vehicle and the battery size it is offering here in that SUV segment. And some sporty driving. Gotta say though, there was a bump here now. When the road is all flat, it's nice. When it's getting bumpy, then it's really rough. So the suspension is not that soft, and also the 20-inch wheels. I mean, they ride perfect when the road is even, but as soon as you have some potholes and stuff, it's really, really rough. You gotta know that. Oh, now we can also see some of the ambient lighting then here when we drive through the dark forest, which is indeed the Black Forest here. You know that especially our friends in the US, they love the Black Forest. For whatever reason, for us Germans, it's just
green.
Some forest in Germany. You know, that's yeah, very interesting thing, definitely. But it really drives sporty, you know. So we know that a lot of the French vehicles usually have like softer suspension and focus on comfort and so on. But this one really has a rather stiffer setup, and that's fun to drive. I mean, for example, here now, 90-degree turn. See here, don't have to steer that much, and it accelerates out of the corner very well. So definitely a lot of fun to drive. That's pretty cool, and I really like this gaming steering wheel, you know. So it actually holds what it promises. That's the cool thing. So as I said, the sport mode, full horsepower, 325, and the 6-second acceleration. Here in the normal mode, we have almost the same horsepower output. However, in the normal mode, when you are just sliding on the throttle, or you, for example, sometimes rolling and you're not really using that performance, then it can also only use the front electric motor. It's more or less a front wheel drive, and when you really hammer it, then also you get the all-wheel drive once again. And there's also the eco mode available. This one would be always front wheel drive, and here there's really a significantly decreased horsepower output. So it's not only about the change in the throttle pedal, this really has less power. And this would be wise, for example, you know that, hey, there's a problem maybe with the range on this trip. I really need maximum range and I don't want to waste any energy on like harsh acceleration or something like that, and or also on the rear electric motor. Then you put in the eco mode and get the best range out of it. And once again, what we showed you earlier, sport mode, when you need the best performance. Here, for example, really have to work a little bit harder on the throttle to get to speed. And this is the combination of there's less sensitivity in the throttle pedal plus a real reduced horsepower output. Here, by the way, at 80 kilometers an hour, more like countryside speed, it's reasonably silent in this vehicle, just to give you this difference here from, when you have that here. You have here in the front also like dual lamination, as we shown to you earlier. And this really helps then also to get this car silent. So also in normal driving, it can be kind of relaxing. Let's just test some of the driving modes with the steering here. So in the normal mode, it's relatively light. Let's see again if there's any difference then to the sport. Yeah, it's a little bit more, I think. Oh, the trolley in the back is like the luggage is going back and forth. Steering input, I wouldn't say that there's like much difference. It's more in the throttle pedal indeed. So as soon as you go to the sport mode, there's much more sensitivity than from the throttle pedal. And assistance systems, here at the cruise control set, it's also then keeping me in the lane actively. Here I can also increase the speed. Also, if I hold it, I can do 5 kilometer steps, for example, and it's actually relatively calm what the steering wheel does here when keeping me in the lane. So that's actually nice. So most of the stuff rather solid. The only thing I'm thinking about, when you want to do some changing of some stuff while driving, that you start thinking, wait a minute, how does it work with the user interface? So some things in the user interface are a little bit too complicated, I feel, while driving. For example, the climate unit would be, something of that should just be easier. But that's not only a Peugeot thing, but a recent trend among all the manufacturers. And why am I actually saying that? I mean, look at that. This is the Apple CarPlay mode, which probably most users will use together with Android Auto. And then we don't have the climate menu here. Then we have to go to climate and then go there. Unless we would use the car internal GPS, then you have it here in the middle, and then you have the usual setup for the climate unit here, there. Yeah, there we go. But when you go back to the CarPlay again, yeah, and then changing temperature while driving, I'm not sure why they didn't think of this, you know what I mean? And what this vehicle can also do here, I have to press OK then, after I hit the turning indicator, and then it does here an automatic lane change. Very nice, actually pretty smooth. So, so far what we've seen also from the French manufacturers, this seems to be like the most sophisticated level 2 assistance systems application. And now we're hopping in the 5008 here, also the E5008 with the all-wheel drive and with this 16 centimeters or 6 inches longer wheelbase, which is significant. The question is, do we feel any difference in driving sport mode here? When you're driving rather calmly, you don't feel any difference because the front cockpit is the same. Here now in the corners, yeah, it also drives really well, nice, and also still feels quite sporty. You feel the longer dimension somewhat, yes, when you, for example, push it out of the corner. But the difference is actually not that large as you would imagine. One of the reasons, especially for the electric versions, is that you have the low center of gravity because the battery is in the bottom of the vehicle, so the weight won't differ that much. Here in situations like these, for example, then you feel that the 3008 is more agile because of the shorter wheelbase. Interesting, of course. Does Leah feel a difference?
No.
Not that much? Not that much?
Sporty.
Interesting.
42, yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, I feel a difference maybe a little bit more as a driver because, when you control the steering wheel, then maybe get a better feeling for that or something. But it's actually good, or it speaks for the 5008 here when Leah says she doesn't feel much of the difference, because usually longer wheelbase means, it's maybe calmer or more steady on going straight motorway, but then it's less fun and less agile in corners. But these agile corners here were actually quite well done. So indeed, the driving difference is not as large as you would expect that. That is a very interesting thing. Of course, the steering is light, and with this electric drivetrain, you directly get a sudden boost also here when you hit the throttle. With that, you have a nice acceleration. It's pretty cool. I mean, the acceleration figure here is 0.5 difference, so 6 seconds for the 3008, 6.5 seconds for the 5008 with the all-wheel drive version here. That is also a thing. When you got the all-wheel drive version here, the difference in acceleration between 3008 and 5008 is not that large. If you go for the front-wheel drive electric version, the difference in acceleration is almost a second, a little bit less than a second between 3008 and 5008. But yeah, I think the main takeaway is really what I feel is that the agility in the drive is not that different. Yeah, maybe the 3008 is still a little bit more fun, but this one here, if you say, hey, you need that for the family with the additional seats, or then maybe soon the version where you just have the larger trunk and you need that, you know, just more flexibility for family and stuff, you don't have to count so much, like, or don't have to take so much away from that funny or fun driving experience. So that's actually also quite cool. Efficiency and consumption, we had some 18 kilowatt hours on 100 kilometers at a steady cruise control speed motorway, 120 kilometers an hour, 75 miles an hour. That's 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour. And with this vehicle here, with a small battery, which has this all-wheel drive connection, we could score a real range of 400 kilometers or 250 miles. And this one here has more driving fun because you have more power, which is pretty cool. The only thing I maybe dislike is the lack of comfort when you have some uneven roads, because 20-inch wheels, not so comfortable suspension. That is where it has its weakness. But the driving fun is definitely on top of the game. But even more interesting with this vehicle, 3008, but also the 5008, is that we have this larger battery available than only with front-wheel drive. But if you take this 97 kilowatt hour battery, then this could even score some 540 kilometers or 330 miles of range. And that's not possible with any other vehicle which is that short. So if you want a car that can be easily parked in and out in the city at the same time, highest range, then this one has a very unique proposition. Not as the all-wheel drive, but as the front-wheel drive version. And the difference between 3008 and 5008, obviously the wheelbase, if you need it for the family, and also if you need the 7 seats, or maybe in future also 5-seater for the 5008. They have a lot of things in common, definitely. Wheelbase is the difference, and that the 5008 is a little bit slower in the acceleration figures because of the increased weight and so on. This one, of course, here then the driving fun king. What do you think about this one? Would you go for the all-wheel drive version or for one of the big batteries? Would you go 3008 or 5008? Tell me in the comments, and now check out the competitors.